In the last 90 days, there has been 400 listings that have expired here in the Winnipeg market. And so is it time to panic? Now see, what I left out was that there's been 1,700 that have sold. So now you see how a headline can really change your perspective on the market. So today we're gonna break down why the homes that aren't selling have expired and why the Winnipeg market is still in crazy good demand despite what you hear about the Canadian real estate market. You see, Winnipeg is not Toronto, we're not Vancouver, we're not even Calgary, where the markets are starting to slow down and claw back. Winnipeg's market is still strong, and I'm gonna show you why today by going over the reasons why some homes aren't selling. And if you are a seller, this is gonna be great information for why you can list now. And if you're a buyer, this is gonna be good information for how you can find properties that aren't selling and maybe get a good deal in this super competitive market. Okay, welcome back. My name is Cody. I'm a realtor here in Winnipeg, and I would love to help you buy, sell, or invest in your next property here in Winnipeg. And so if you saw that intro and you heard it, and you're one of those people who actually was one of those properties that expired, we're gonna go through the reasons why the properties that aren't selling. But if you're going through this and your home doesn't meet any of that criteria, chances are it was marketed poorly. And so it's probably better to find a better person who's gonna market it, if you know what I'm saying. So this is gonna be pretty math heavy, but I think it's gonna be very informative for the average person to understand what the Winnipeg market is currently like. And yes, obviously the past 90 days isn't always a good reflection of the future, but it is probably our most recent current data that is a good indicator of where the market is heading. So we're gonna divide the expired listings into 4 different categories, and I'll explain what each of them mean, but most of them are gonna be divided by price. Usually that's what is driving a house selling or not. There's always a price where a house can sell in any given market. And so if it's priced too highly, chances are it's not gonna attract enough buyers or have enough demand at that price point. And if it's too low, well, we'll get into the different reasons for the different price points. The top bracket of homes, which is over 600,000, which for this scenario, we're gonna call luxury homes, just because they're more expensive and they're usually outside the reach of a first-time home buyer. That was 10% of homes that didn't sell, okay? The next 26 was in that $425,000 to $600,000 price point, and I call that the millennial upsize, or the double degree, no kids type home, where they have maybe, regardless of if they have kids, it's 2 people who have an educated college university degree that are making decent money, who can afford in that price range. And so I call that the modern day millennials. The third price range, which was 35% of the homes that didn't sell, is right around the median home price in Winnipeg, which is right around $425,000 or less. Now, obviously there's some homes that are well below 200 that are just dumpsters and they're selling as land, and those don't always sell that quickly. And then the last 43% of homes that didn't sell or that expired was new construction. I'm gonna get into why that happened as well. So looking in the luxury bracket, I think it's important to compare this market to a previous one to sort of understand what kind of market we're in. And one of the best analogies I can find based on data is 2022, which was a very competitive market. And so in this bracket, in that same period in 2022, 91 homes had expired in 2022 and 110 had sold in 2022, which is about a 55% sale rate. In 2025, we're at a 46% sale rate, so it's a little bit softer, and that's mostly going to be due to the fact that interest rates aren't quite as low, and so it's a little bit harder to borrow and get into that top tier price range. Okay, in that modern day millennial category, there was 365 that expired in 2022, 1,941 that sold, giving us a ratio of 85% of the listings selling. Now that's very high. In this current market, we're seeing about 80%. However, 80% of these homes were new construction homes. And so we'll get into why that's important later. And then the first-time home buyer category, which is around that median home price, this is where things start to get a lot more interesting. You see, in those price ranges, location, location, location is by far the most important metric. And so if you remove all of the garbage locations in Winnipeg or the less desirable locations in Winnipeg, then the amount that expires drops significantly. And so this is where, if you know somebody or you yourself are in that price category, you're feeling this pressure because a lot of people are shopping in that median home price, and it's very competitive and they can't find anything, and homes aren't expiring, at least at a healthy rate, because Normally, homes sitting for longer is actually healthy for the market. That's called a balanced market, and we are not in that. And the reason location always holds up is because more desirable real estate always holds its value better. But what we're seeing now is real estate in bad locations or less desirable locations holding its value or actually appreciating. And while some people might argue that's good for the city or good for the different parts of areas for them to appreciate because they're becoming better, the problem is the underlying metrics of that place becoming rejudicated aren't there. The actual neighborhood hasn't gotten better. It's just a matter of home prices with no supply are going up in price, and people are overpaying. And I'm worried that some people are not going to be able to get out of this hole for 5 to 10 years. Okay, so now let's talk new construction. So why doesn't new construction sell? Well, the way that builders typically work is they will have their build price, and rather than go down in price, when somebody wants to reduce that price, what they will do instead is add incentives. Sometimes that comes in the form of adding a garage, finishing a basement, throwing in appliances, air conditioner. And note, that's why they don't include a lot of that stuff at the beginning so that they can add them on later. So rather than getting a $10,000 price cut, they actually give you bonus incentives for you to keep the price the same so that down the road when they go to sell that same house, they don't have to lower the price. It's a lot easier for them to have their base price that they can argue this is how much it's worth. And people don't always see the other negotiated terms when it populates the MLS with the sold price. And so something that's very important to keep in mind if you're buying new construction and you're looking at sold data, it's really important that your agent knows what did that other house sell for, given what it was included with, or what was included in that sale, right? Because a $600,000 house that sold might not be the same as a $600,000 house that had appliances, air conditioning, and a basement finish, right? That's an extra $50,000 to $100,000. So it's important to know that information ahead of time. Other reason new construction sometimes doesn't sell is because they have multiple periods or periods of time when they're trying to sell that house. Sometimes it's initially before the property is finished, and then it's when the property is actually finished. And so usually there's a couple of times when the property will be tried where the builder will try to sell the property. And if it doesn't sell one of those earlier times, no skin off their back. If it does, it's a bonus for them. And so because of this, these new construction listings that expire can really inflate that amount of listings that expire, making the market seem better than it is, when in fact, a lot of resale homes or typical homes that you might buy are selling. And it makes it very hard for a buyer to buy something, which is something people may have realized in this market already. And so the reason that's important is because if you start to see people talking about how many more listings are expired, it's good to have that information taken with a grain of salt because there's probably more behind the story there. And at the same time, if you see delinquencies or mortgage defaults go up, that isn't always necessarily tied to the market. That's usually going to be more tied to the economy as a whole. Real estate supply is so bad right now that even if mortgage defaults go up, it probably won't even crash the market that significantly, at least here in Winnipeg. I'm not speaking for other markets. Because as more people default and more hits the supply market, those homes are being eaten up because, like we said, the amount of homes that are expiring or the types of homes that are expiring are not really true expires. And so what I'm trying to say is that the Winnipeg market is very strong right now if you're a seller. And so if you're thinking about selling, it's a good time. If you are a buyer, it's tough out there. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but there are still opportunities to find deals, but you have to be very creative and you have to understand the value of the house you're buying, not the list price.